I've known Sean for over 20 plus years, and he's always had this insight into kind of what's next. And he's always been on top of sort of trends, leading edge. Earlier in our careers, I remember Sean kind of really pushed me to think about the new emerging investment models that were created with cloud computing, which then led to my starting one of the first accelerators in the country here in Pittsburgh, Alpha Lab. And then, 6 years ago, Sean had the vision and really that startups could be started anywhere, including in companies, and started CSL. And then last year, you could tell when Sean starts thinking about these things, he started, I think he put a LinkedIn post and started thinking about the implications of Gen AI. So this was just when ChatGPT sort of kind of took hold. And he was thinking about, the impact on various business processes. What was the killer app? And I know at the last year's forum and also this year, Impact AI, he's been updating this audience about his work. So today, I'm really excited to sort of introduce Sean to come up and give us an update and maybe an announcement. So anyway, please welcome CSL Co-Founder Sean Ammirati.
All right, it is great to see everybody. I think we should just give Jim and the CSL team one more round of applause. This has been incredible, guys. Hallie, Sean Mawini, thanks, guys. You guys are doing awesome. I just wanted to talk for a moment about what I'm doing next. So for those of you who've known me for about 10 years, I've said the one thing I would definitely never do again is start a venture-backed startup. Rules are meant to be broken. So the punchline is have gone and raised money and started another company. But I want to talk a little bit about how I got to that point. And I thought for this audience, it would be interesting to do it in the context of just how we got to CSL. So myself and Matt Crespi, who many of you remember, was a close grad student collaborator of mine, had the idea for Corporate Startup Lab. And each of us kind of came to that idea from different perspectives. For me, a lot of it came from the book that I wrote that some of you may remember, and I think it helped many of you fall asleep at night. This book came out, and when the book came out, it was loosely based on a course that I had taught here looking at how do you scale ideas post-product market fit. And I went back and looked, and just to remind myself, like the original marketing plan was that people like the accelerator that Jim was at, Alpha Lab, and Y Combinator and Techstars would be our channel to sell this to lots of entrepreneurs. And that absolutely was true. We sold lots of copies to founders. But if you think about founders, there's like one or two founders who buy a book, and typically they share it. So it's like one founder who buys a book. And as many of you know, one of the things big companies like to do is buy books for like their whole management team. And so like a company like Bosch or PNC or MSA, like those guys have just, by raw numbers, a lot more people to buy books than one or two person startups. And I realized that like this is the dirty secret of entrepreneurship literature, right? Like all of the entrepreneurship books, not just mine, but Eric's and Steve's and Alex's, like all of our books, the real market for those books are not the two-person startups. The real market for those books are the companies like all of you are at. And I had a little bit of a different situation, which is, as many of you know who've been around this for a long time, like I had started and sold a couple companies. I was a venture capitalist at the time. So the book was not the business model I was in, as opposed to a lot of those other people. And so started having a lot of questions about like, well, how does this work? Dave Mawini and I started talking about this very deeply. I think it's also worth saying that there would not be a CSL today without Dave. So thank you, Dave, again, for all of your support on this. But I remember one day Dave and I were talking, and we had this somewhat maybe obvious, but it was powerful for me, realization, which is that every large company was at one point a startup, right? Remember, our definition of startup is a project that starts small and becomes big. Every large company was once a startup. And the challenge is, over time, startups often turn into big companies and they forget the things that made them successful startups. And that led us to trying to start a program that really took an evidence-based approach to how do you launch and keep growing these startups, because we realized this was like a critical issue. And there's a lot of people in the room who remember the first CSL demo day. I was going back and looking through the photos. Actually, our next speaker, Dave Passavant, was there. Lou was there. Lori, there were folks from Philips, from MSA. So there was a group of you who were there. I would just say, looking back on that, thank you for your patience. I was very much, I think, a bit of an outsider at the time, right? I was about as not corporate as you, in the term corporate startup lab, we were light on corporate and heavy on startup at those early days. But we had a lot of fun. We learned a lot. I think we did an incredible job getting enough of the things right that the things that we got wrong, it kind of worked out. And then obviously we've continued to add people to the team who've made the team much better than Matt or I ever could have done, just the two of us. Looking at Melissa, who I think took how we taught the classes and really transformed it to the positive. And so it was just an amazing kind of crawl, walk, run thing. And you know, last year when Jim took it over, it was obvious to me that CSL was in great hands. And I think what we can see over the last year is that that's true. And I had some freedom and flexibility to figure out what to do next. And so I started working on two questions that at the time I thought were two relatively independent questions. But the first of them was helping the Bosch Corporation, at the time had nothing to do with the Gen AI stuff I was doing, but it's just think through a problem that we've been thinking through for years at CSL, but at a much deeper level. And you remember Karsten talking at the last forum, hopefully with Estella, about this. But it was really this question of like, okay, as businesses and industries transform, how do you make sure you keep them relevant, right? Because the things that made companies relevant won't keep them relevant. And ultimately, the answer is grow. You have to figure out how to grow, how to do this corporate startup thing. And so for the largest company that I'd ever worked with this deeply, I mean, Bosch is a 100 billion euro a year company. We took a deep dive right at the C-suite for how to do that. And it really brought me back to a lot of the CSL roots, right? Well, how do companies grow? Well, companies grow by doing two things really, really well. They process market signals and technology signals, and they figure out how to translate those into business opportunities. And coming back to this, every successful company was once a startup. That's what entrepreneurs are great at. Entrepreneurs are great at looking out into the market, becoming obsessed about the customer problems that they have, and have deep domain expertise on the technology front on how to solve those problems, blend those together to generate growth. The challenge with this, and I think the reason why companies sometimes stop being as relevant as they once were, is that over time these companies, it's not that they don't have the people to do this, right? This has been my argument for 8 years, and I will never stop making this argument. I believe companies are full of people with the skills to be incredibly successful entrepreneurs. I think it is embarrassing that we have relegated entrepreneurship to 20-somethings at engineering places like Carnegie Mellon wearing skinny jeans and T-shirts. It's not that those people aren't entrepreneurs, but it's also the rest of the population. And if we don't figure out how to make everybody do entrepreneurship, we've got big problems here. So I absolutely believe companies don't have a talent problem, but they do have a process problem, right? They spend more and more time planning the work and doing the wrong work, and less time doing the right work. And so we spent some time with Bosch over the last year looking at this, and we had lots of success. But in parallel, I was doing the other thing that I had talked to a lot of folks at the forum about, is the project that I was doing, which is looking at how generative AI could be effectively a co-founder for entrepreneurs, because it felt just like the moment when Jim and I were talking about cloud computing, right? The real magic of cloud computing for entrepreneurship was that all of a sudden, you didn't need to spend 7 figures before you could put a user on your platform, because you didn't have to be a named account from Dell and Sun and things like that. Dave's nodding his head in the back of the room because he remembers when we were doing MSpoke together, there were 5 named accounts in Pittsburgh. The other 4 were places like UPMC Enterprises, and then they would come meet with us, and it was like, guys, today sun's coming. It would be great if everybody just wore shoes to the office today. No slippers in the office tomorrow when the sun guys come. But we were spending 7 figures regularly just to put people on our product, right? When we sold that business to LinkedIn, we had a $500 a month credit card bill. Like, cloud computing wasn't just like a technology change. It completely changed the economics of building startups. And it was one of these 10x multipliers on how fast and how far you could get. As I started looking at what our entrepreneurship students in the Schwartz Center were doing with these tools, I realized, like, oh my gosh, this is the next 10x change in how fast you can build these things. And so myself and Adam Pulisic, we created a class here on campus called AI Venture Studio, where we asked students to create businesses thinking of generative AI as their co-founder. The experience was amazing. I've been teaching studio classes at Carnegie Mellon for 13 years. I have a pretty good barometer on how fast a student team should be able to move through a project in a semester. I will tell you, and this is not about the students. I've had incredible students long before us, but the student teams were good, but they were not that. I mean, student teams at Carnegie Mellon have always been good. Every single one of those teams made more progress than any of the startup teams I've done before, and most of them were like an order of magnitude further along. Like, it was this amazing inflection point for how fast you could build these companies. And we talked about it in the New York Times. People have been kind of interested in what we've been doing there. And I realized, and I said this at the forum last year, but I realized that, like, also this was really finally a design pattern for how to use generative AI to accomplish knowledge work, like all knowledge work. Because there's this real debate going on right now, like, is Gen AI gonna take your job? That's like a thing you hear when you go out and talk to people about this. And the punchline is, like, no, but someone who knows how to use generative AI is absolutely gonna take your job from someone who refuses to use it. But the sort of double click below that is, what you want is not fully autonomous generative AI systems. What you want is human-in-the-loop systems. And as we started looking at this co-founder, we started to realize, like, oh, wow, this is like a wonderful design pattern. I talked the last event a bit about sort of how we're using RAGs plus agents to do this. And basically, all these things converged. And I realized, like, man, we started doing some work with Bosch, which I'll talk about in a moment, where these two projects converged. And I was like, this is a company. So I had to call my boss, my wife, and say, like, hey guys, hey honey, good news. We're raising money and doing another startup. And I say we, not that she literally has to do anything with it, but as you guys know who've done this, like, she bears more of that than anybody, and she was sweet enough to go along with this adventure. So we put together a team against this. I'm super proud of the team that we put together. So I have two of the 3 leaders here today. So Neil Soni, who a lot of you know, heads up business development for us. Neil and I have known each other since he was an undergrad here in the ChemE program, which is not an easy program, not that you would expect it was, and he decided to do a startup while he was in the ChemE program, as if that wasn't hard enough. Went through the Alpha Lab program and has scaled that up. Then he's been part of a number of different Birchmere venture-backed companies and ran innovation for Estee Lauder for a season. Anna, who's our head of product, Anna and I got to know each other when she was doing a bunch of stuff here, including working with Delta on their innovation program. I went to work with Dave at Numa, who will be speaking next, and then left Numa to run a number of AI product initiatives inside of Google. And Andrew Giesel, who is actually speaking at another conference today in Las Vegas, but Andrew was the first AI engineer hired at Moderna, built out a lot of the different Moderna AI enterprise products, including MChat, that a lot of the OpenAI stuff is based on, and he's joining the team as our CTO. For those of you who were at the AI Academy, or who were at the forum 2 years ago and heard about the Moderna AI Academy, Andrew was our closest collaborator on that CMU Moderna collaboration. So put together a team, I think, that knows how to do these things. The specific problem that got us really excited about this in the enterprise space was taking this general space of generative AI as your co-founder and applying it to the R&D process, right? So R&D teams want to invent, but they're paid to innovate, right? They're paid to deliver commercial value. And this creates a tension between the executive leadership and the R&D teams. And we are not the only people who've realized the left half of this slide. There's an abundance of research out there and tools and open source projects that can show you that LLMs can make researchers significantly more productive. The challenge is if you just make them more productive, i.e. help them invent more, you're just taking an existing problem and you're making it a bigger problem because now you have the same tension between executives and R&D folks of, oh, my R&D team just is creating a bunch of hammers looking for nails, and it's like, oh great, they just created 10 times as many hammers. What you need to do is also translate that into how do you think about the commercial value of that? And again, per earlier in the talk, entrepreneurship and doing that is important. And this came home for us first with two of our kind of design partner customers even before there was a company, because originally I thought this would just be kind of a fun open source project, famous last words. And so with Bosch spends about 8% of their revenue on research and development every year. So, 7.3 billion euros last year on R&D. And it's, the tagline of the Bosch Research Group is innovation for life, right? To translate that into commercial value. But the processes that did that, I think just weren't that fast. It comes back to this, when companies scale up, they spend too much time planning the work and too much time working on the wrong problems. And so as they started using some of our tools, the results were pretty incredible. We took a process that they had been doing that took about 3 months, full-time for 3 months. These are master's and PhD researchers. About 10% of the ideas at the end of the process got through to the next gate. Holding that gate constant, we were able to take a 3-month process down to 3.5 days, and 30% of the ideas got through the gate. And you can see the quote from Karsten, who talked to you at the last event a little bit about what we were doing before we'd done it. This is the punchline on how it worked out, and it was kind of after one of these workshops that I was like, wow, there's something here, and ultimately, we don't think we can deploy this as an open source tool. We need to actually kind of plug this into the infrastructure and do it in a way where we make sure we maintain a lot of the things that Nick was talking about earlier, helping companies keep this data private and secure and things like that. Some other customers, and they've had very nice things to say about what we're doing as well, which makes us quite excited. So how do we do this? Well, we come back to that same point. Help companies understand these tech and market signals, help them explore both those sources, the internal and external sources, and then help them generate commercially viable and valuable products around that. I'm gonna run over here and just walk you through it real quick. All right, hopefully that's on, perfect. All right, so I'm gonna quickly show you how this works. If you log into the Grow Signals platform, you'll see there's sort of two things you can do. You can do research or you can generate concepts. So we'll start with research. And if you go to research, you can chat with your internal sources. So this could be things like customer surveys, voice of customer, data from your CRM system. This also could be like internal technical white papers that you've written, right? And you can kind of analyze those. But you can also go and use those agents that we talked about last time to go and pull in additional third-party information. So maybe the most relevant pieces of information from you are not currently in your repository of knowledge. It might be on academic journals that have been published. So maybe you want to go to Google Scholar and look for those. And we use agents to actually go through and explore this in a way where they're solving for that problem. So think of this as like a research assistant working for you to solve those. You can then, once you find something that's interesting, you can either do structured brainstorming or you can just immediately go from that to a concept. And then you have a nice profile where you can go through and see where each of these concepts are. If you look at a concept, you can both get an overview of the concept as well as things like it will automatically, for the researcher, generate a first draft of what the TAM, SAM, and SOM for that idea would be. Or it'll take that same concept and it'll automatically generate a business model canvas. Again, a first draft of it, so you'll need to edit this, but it'll automatically generate that. Or it'll go in and it'll use Michael Porter's 5 forces to not just give you the direct competitors, but the direct and indirect competitors for the idea that you're thinking about. And as you walk through this, you can hopefully get a sense how this tool is really taking this process, and I'll run back over here. It's taking this process and not replacing the research or not replacing the team, but it's taking them and it's making them significantly more effective by acting as their co-founder, right? This is how we're delivering a 10 to 20x improvement in efficiency and effectiveness of the stuff that we're building. So what are we doing next real quick, and then I'll give one offer special for this audience. So what are we doing next? The next thing that we're gonna do in the next couple of months is we also wanna help executives and teams evaluate this at the portfolio or the thesis level. One of the things hopefully that came across from Nick and Alana's presentation this morning, which that was not a setup, like it wasn't like Jim and I talked ahead of time about that. I had no idea what they were gonna talk about, but like when you can tell how like this thesis-driven approach to innovation works quite well in venture. And I think it's another opportunity for corporates to learn from that. We're gonna try to help companies look about the existing products that they're doing against these theses, as well as generate additional ideas that could fit into that overall thesis so that you can figure out the incumbency advantages of your business and what might work there, and then go through and take that broader portfolio and refine and prioritize those. Okay, last point, and then I will introduce our next speaker. Just for the CSL folks, because I feel like all of you guys have been along on this journey for a lot of years with me, and I really appreciate that. Look for somebody with a Growth Signals branded Patagonia item, because if you remember, like, it wasn't really a CSL till we got Patagonia vest for everybody that said CSL on them, and that also works for Growth Signals. Like, it wasn't really company in my mind till we had a Patagonia vest I could put on in the morning. So find one of us with one of these vests if you're interested in something just for the folks who are here today. So if you want, we'll do like a 90-minute virtual workshop for you to walk you through both how you can do some ideation with some of the content that you have, as well as how this AI-informed innovation might fit into your R&D and innovation process. So 3 simple steps: just sign some kind of mutual NDA so you feel comfortable sharing information with us. Give us a few sample internal documents that we can use to get started, and then we'll work with you to analyze those, as well as use the agents to find additional pieces of information, and then do a 90-minute kind of workshop-style program with you. If you want to learn a little bit more about what we're doing, it's at growthsignals.com. And again, I do want to kind of finish by just saying thank you to all of you guys, because I do feel like this is, has been almost like a culmination of 25 years of work on my part, and I could not have done it without how incredibly supportive this community has been. And so I really appreciate it. I'm super excited about what the whole team at CSL is going to continue to do, and hopefully being able to continue to work with you. I think